Good morning, everyone. It's Mrs. Rewa. This morning, I'm spending some time going through some old photographs of my family. I love to do this. We have some very old black and white pictures of when my dad was a little boy and what his life was like. I'm sure that you have some of these photos in your family as well. If you don't, ask your parents or ask your grandparents, because photos help to tell a story, and we all have a different history, and it's so wonderful to know about that history. Today, I want to talk about my grandparents for just a moment. This is my Mimi and Pop, we called her. But I especially want to talk about this woman. Her name was Elsa Walther. And she was the first on my dad's side to come to America. Now, here's a photograph of my grandmother who married my grandfather. His name was Walter. And I'm going to highlight him a little bit today because he had a very, very interesting life. And I promise I'll tie it into music. Before I go into the musical part of things, I just wanted to share with you that I have kept all of the letters that my grandparents ever wrote to me. I love them. They are treasures that you can't buy. And I keep them all in a notebook. And since we've had so much time at home, maybe your grandparents are even quarantining with you, I would encourage you to make a phone call and reach out to your family and try to learn some of your family's history, because it's really special and it helps to make you who you are, to know your background, to know your history, and it's important, something that you can pass on to your own children. These notes and little notes of encouragement, I can look at them when I'm feeling sad. They always make me feel so much better. And I do have a few things that belong to my grandparents that matter to me. The chair I'm sitting in, this was Elsa's, that woman that I pointed to, that was my great-grandmother. Elsa was her name. And she had a very interesting life that I'm going to talk about. When she was a little girl, she was orphaned. Her parents passed away. And her sister were divided. They lived in Germany at the time. And Elsa had an uncle who lived here in the States. He lived on Thomas Edison's estate. Do you know who Thomas Edison is? He invented the light bulb. That's right. So I told some of my 8th graders this story earlier in the year, and every year when I worked at St. Michael's, I would always wait until the inventor portion of science was introduced, and then I would bring in something from my family to share with them, because I believe that music ties into every single subject. And so I'm going to try to combine some history and music in today's lesson with you. Anyway, little Elsa, her parents had passed away, and her uncle, who lived on Thomas Edison's estate, he lived there because he was the landscaper. He took care of all of the exotic plants that Mr. Edison collected, and this was his winter estate in South Florida. So anyway, her uncle said that he would take care of her if she were willing to come over to America on a boat by herself with one trunk of belongings. She did that. She was very brave. She was around 11 or 12 years old at the time. And when she arrived in the States, she lived on Mr. Edison's estate. And not in his house, but in a small little, sort of like a servant quarter house, a little tiny house where the landscaper, her uncle, lived, and she got to live there. So Mr. Edison really gave her the opportunity to live here and to have a life here after such tragedy of losing her parents and leaving her family in Germany. Anyway, she grew up there, and she was always told to leave Mr. Edison alone, that he was thinking. Sometimes he would be out on the dock with his cat, and she'd want to say something, but her uncle always said, no, he is sweet enough to let us live here. Do not disturb his thinking. Do not disturb what he's doing. He is a great inventor. And Thomas Edison was a great inventor. And one day, Elsa grew up, and she married, and she had a little boy. That little boy was my grandfather. My grandfather's name was Walter. And when Walter was about 4 years old or so, she took him back to Mr. Edison's estate. She wanted to thank Mr. Edison for letting her live there as a little girl and grow up there, because now she was independent and she was able to make a life for herself in America, and she really felt like she had Mr. Edison to thank for that. So she held little Walter's hand and they walked onto the estate, and Mr. Edison said to little Walter, "Would you like to see my laboratory?" And actually, I'll show you what he looked like at the time. So follow me a second. I always keep this picture on a mirror. Okay, hopefully you can see. So there is a photograph. The woman in the middle is Elsa, all grown up, and the older little boy is Walter. That's my grandfather. So he was probably younger than he was in that picture by a couple of years, but he was just a little boy. And Mr. Edison said, "Would you like to go into my laboratory?" Yes, 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 he said, "I would." So he took him into the laboratory and he showed him some of the original light bulbs that he had invented. And I have one to share with you. This is what it looks like. It's in a glass case. I'm going to bring it close to you so you can see. There's a note inside of it, and I'm going to read it to you because it's a note that my dad wrote to me. Walter was my dad's father. So I'm going to carefully take this off, and I'm going to read you this note. It says, "Dear Katie," that's me, "this is a genuine Edison incandescent light bulb. It is made of hand-blown glass with handmade filaments. This is a very early light bulb from the 1890s that lasted only a few hours. The bulb was given to your grandfather, Pop, Walter Ewald Knuckle, when he was just a little boy. His mom and dad, Elsa and John, took him to Fort Myers, Florida on vacation when he was about 7 years old. We think this was in 1914. They visited Thomas Alva Edison's winter estate, where Elsa's uncle had been the caretaker for many, many years. Your great-grandmother lived on the estate while her uncle was first brought here to America at the age of 13. He was introduced to Edison, and Edison, as a gift, gave your Pop 2 light bulbs. This is one of them. A bulb very similar to this one is on display at the Museum of Science and History in downtown Jacksonville. Love, Dad." And that's a note that my dad gave to me, and this light bulb that my dad gave to me. If you want a closer look, I'll bring it to you and you can kind of see the filament a little bit more. Can you see that? See how it's hand-blown glass? This is such a treasure that, I could never buy. And all of these notes and photographs of my family are also treasures. And the reason that I'm sharing this with you is because I have a special song about inventors. And Thomas Edison, as we know, was one of the greatest inventors. We would not have this light behind us in our homes, on the streets, to light up the streets, if it had not been for him and his brilliant mind. And I'm not sure what you're spending all of your time doing at home. I know you're working very hard on your online studies, but I also want you to know that this time at home is something we may never have again. And there's a lot of sadness going on. We need to continue to pray for those that are going through tragic times, but we also need to make the best of this time at home, become the best version of ourselves. That means that if you have an idea, if there's something you've been wanting to make or something you've been wanting to experiment with, you should do it now. I know in our house, Jude has been making little ramps, skateboard ramps for fingerboarding. He likes to do that. And Eden, my daughter, and myself, we have written some music, and we've experimented with some cooking. So it's a wonderful time to experiment, to come up with your own inventions of sorts. And that can be with music as well. As you know, when we compose, we're inventing new music. So, speaking of new music, this is a music box from my mom's side of the family. This had belonged to her grandmother. It even still plays music. If I find it, see if it'll play for us. It's temperamental. It doesn't always want to do it. Is it gonna play for us today? Maybe not. I don't want to keep it too long, but look at how old it is. It's so beautiful. And another thing I have that is a huge treasure from her side of the family is my great-grandmother's rosary that I still pray with. And anyway, so these are very special things, and we would not have any of these things without the mind of great inventors. So what I want you to do, and you may need to zoom in on the screen, but these are the inventors that the song that you're going to click on next mentions. And the song actually tells you what these inventors invented, what they are known for. So I want you to make sure before you listen to the song, you have a piece of paper and you have written down all of these inventors. You can pause the video if you need to, but here are the inventors that you need to know. So pause it if you need to and write them down. And once you have those down on a piece of paper, you're going to click the next link and you're going to listen to a song called The Inventor Bounce. It's such a fun song, and I love that it combines history and music together, so that's really cool. And last thing I just want to say about inventions is that one other piece of furniture I have in my house was a cabinet for a phonograph. Thomas Edison, we know he invented the light bulb, but we also know that he is responsible for being the first person to record sound. You would not even be able to listen to me today. We would not have this opportunity to record sound or sight as any way of doing video or listening to music without Thomas Edison's great invention of the phonograph and recording sound. This table behind me is so old, of course, it doesn't serve as a phonograph anymore, but we made it into a sink. Sometimes you can take some things that have been old and you can repurpose them in a way. I'll show it to you, it's really neat. Oops, can you sort of see it? I wish I could pull it out because I could show you on the back that it says it was Thomas Edison phonograph table. Anyway, I'm gonna go for now, boys and girls. I hope you've enjoyed this lesson. I know that it's a little lengthy, but I hope you understand that what I'm trying to do is combine music, this awesome song that you're gonna listen to, and history so that we can learn about inventors and we can remember some very important history. Don't forget to find out some of your family history while you're on quarantine. Bye-bye.